Jai Hind, ladies and gentlemen. And I have with me Tom Cooper. He's an analyst, he's a historian, and he's somebody that all of you have seen on Indian television for quite some time, especially after Operation Sindur and during Operation Sindur. I had prepared a long list of very technical questions for Tom, but while driving here from Noida, I was told that Iran just got attacked. So all my questions are now aside. I'm going to talk about Iran. At least I'm going to start off with Iran. And Tom, my first question to you is, how does an operation of this magnitude put into effect? I mean, you have the Al Udeid Air Base, you have Jordan, you have Israel, you have USS Abraham Lincoln floating around somewhere off the bay of, or off the shores of Oman, and in the Mediterranean Sea you have the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier. How do you network such an operation where there are possibly hundreds of fighter aircraft, hundreds of reconnaissance aircraft, a very, very large percentage of US air effort? How do you coordinate all of this?
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me here. It's fantastic to be here in New Delhi. My first visit in India, I'm really humbled by the reception. As for your questions, the essence is networking. It's just like in civilian life. That means the military is operating its own internet, and this internet is used to fuse all the information available about enemy forces, about their capabilities and intentions, and then also about own forces, who is deployed where, what is the current status of the force in question, is it ready for combat or not, what are the stocks of weaponry, of supplies, of fuel, and so on. And all of this is fed into the same headquarter, into the same command center, and commanded and controlled in centralized fashion. That's how it works. We have seen this at work also in India last year, in May, during the Operation Sindur, when all the information was fused in one system, distributed to the Army, to the Air Force, to all the forces involved, in order to keep everybody informed all the time, and in order to better coordinate, or actually to, in case of India, to superbly coordinate own operations. Whether air defenses from Pakistani UAV attacks and missile strikes, or own offensive operations against Pakistan.
All right. I'm going to come to Operation Sindur in a while, but I'd like to ask you, Tom, my question is that even during Operation Midnight Hammer and during Operation Rising Lion, which happened earlier, American aircraft and Israeli aircraft, and I'm not only talking about the 5th generation aircraft, 4 generation, 4.5 generation, they were able to fly over Tehran without any challenge, literally no challenge. How is that possible? Hasn't Iran invested in air defense? And do you think, what are the lessons that Iran drew from Midnight Hammer, from Rising Lion, that even in this, they knew that they could be attacked again, and today they have been attacked again. Why didn't they strengthen their air defense?
Okay, let me try to dissect this in following fashion. On one side, Israeli aircraft were never free to fly over Tehran. This is Israeli propaganda. Excuse me for expression, but it is as simple as that. What the Israelis were free to do was to fly up to the border with Iran and to lob their missiles either over longer range into Tehran area, or to drop their GPS-assisted bombs on targets up to 100 to 120 kilometers deep inside Iran. But they were never free to fly deeper over Iran. Why were they not free to do that? Because there is not only one, but there are 2 different but well integrated air defense systems in Iran. One operated by the regular Islamic Republic of Iran Air Defense Force, and the other operated by the IRGC, by the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Force Command. So what what was given to us in form of official Israeli statements was one thing, and then there was the reality. And there was a significant difference between the two.
All right.
That is on one side. On the other side, the Israelis have this very advanced air-launched ballistic missiles, which have a range of up to 1,000 kilometers, depending on their type. So they were accelerating, flying very high, accelerating, climbing over central Iraq, over Ramadi, over the area generally west of Baghdad,
right.
and launching missiles from this area deep over Tehran. This is how they were operating. Of course, they did, with the time, start operating their UAVs deeper over Iran, including close to Tehran, including Esfahan, including Tabriz anyway. But again, there is a difference whether they are operating UAVs, which are then shot down in quite some numbers, or whether they are operating manned aircraft. There is no evidence that they did operate manned aircraft that deep over Iran, like over Tehran. Excuse me, what was the second part of your question in this regards?
I said that hasn't Iran been able to develop its air defenses to such an extent? If, let's say, the Israelis did not fly, the Americans did.
Yeah.
The Americans obviously did because they were dropping these, MOABs on MOABs on their nuclear sites.
Okay, this U.S. strike on Iranian nuclear facilities is also no indication for the strength or weakness of Iranian air defense system, because the Americans haven't sent just this, 8 or something B-2 stealth bombers, but they came in with a huge strike package of some 50 aircraft into Iranian airspace. So it was a concentrated, focused operation in order to bring these bombers safely over their targets, release the bombs, and withdraw without loss. They have managed this. Point is this: Iranians have, especially with help of China, over the last 10 years, built a very powerful air defense system. But it was still incomplete because the production rates in Iran were much too low. And the IGC was insistent on manufacturing missiles in Iran, just in Iran, not in China as well. So although most of these systems were actually developed in cooperation between Iran and China, production was in Iran. Correspondingly, the production rates were very low. The question is now whether, especially for the current war, the Chinese are going to add their ammunition to Iranian systems, because the Iranian requirement for the Chinese was to develop them systems which are highly flexible, which can use Russian ammunition, specialized ammunition which is manufactured in Iran, and also Chinese ammunition. So the question is now whether the Chinese are going to replenish Iranian stocks.
All right. Just a few minutes back, breaking news is that Iran has hit Qatar, UAE, and Saudi Arabia.
And Bahrain.
Yeah. So these are obviously US bases that they have hit, or tried to hit. Were you expecting that? Because Iran has always been very vocal. You attack us, we'll hit you back across the Middle East.
Iran has multiple solutions. One of these is going to, actually all of them are going to depend on the rate of damage the US air power is going to cause. Because last year, the Israelis couldn't cause enough damage to draw some kind of decisive victory. From their point of view, they didn't even half finish the job, or didn't destroy even the half of the targets they wanted to destroy. They didn't destroy completely the Iranian capability to manufacture new missiles. They didn't destroy all the bases, especially not underground bases, and so on and so on. Moreover, the Israelis couldn't reach further, with one exception, they couldn't reach further than eastern outskirts of Tehran. Correspondingly, the Iranians were free to move their heavier missiles, to maneuver them around central Iran, around eastern Iran, and fire them from there at Israel. The US air power is now enabling joint command of US and Israeli forces to strike precisely these targets in central Iran and in eastern Iran, because it's relatively close. It's based in Persian Gulf, in Emirates, in Qatar, in Bahrain, in Saudi Arabia, correspondingly, it can better reach such areas. And the US intelligence, which was playing the crucial role already the last year, is now playing an even more important role. Furthermore, tanker aircraft. These are big airliners converted or purposely built to serve as petrol stations, you can call them, in the air. They are refueling incoming Israeli and US aircraft and stretching their range significantly through this capability. So the Americans are offering an entirely different capability to Israel foremost through this. They are going to support the Israeli airstrikes and support their own strikes. In turn, Iranians have not only some 2,000 something heavier ballistic missiles to strike Israel, but they also have many more shorter range ballistic missiles to strike all the possible US bases around the Persian Gulf. They have already hit one US base outside Manama in Bahrain just half an hour ago or something. They're going to strike those in Emirates, in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia as well. Saudi Arabia has been meanwhile hit too by Iranian missiles. So now Iranians now have, let's say, two options to keep it simple. One option is to go all out right from the start. For example, if they are afraid that their missiles might get destroyed by Americans in their underground facilities, in their underground bunkers, shelters, or they go for something like drip feed option, which is to fire every day 15, 20 missiles and those wait for similar effect like the last year, which is to attrit Israeli stockpiles of anti-ballistic missile defense systems to the level where the Israelis were out of missiles to shoot at incoming Iranian ballistic missiles. So the US Navy then moved its warships close to the Israeli coast and was trying to defend Israel with its own anti-ballistic missile systems. But what happened as a result of this is that the US forces have exhausted something like a production worth of 2 years of ballistic missile defense systems. So now the question is whether the Americans have enough missiles to defend Israel and their own bases for longer than, let's say, 1 week. That is my rough estimate.
All right. Now, Tom, I'm going to ask you about Operation Sindur because that is, I think, what many people would like to know. You were mentioning a little while earlier that one thing that we have not discussed enough is that element of surprise. That when the Indian Air Force or the Indian Armed Forces actually hit Pakistan, Pakistan did not know what happened. And for a certain period of time, they were in a state of maybe shock or indecision. I'd like to hear your views on that, please.
One of, for me, actually almost shocking moments from researching about the Operation Sindur last year is the fact that when comparing official Pakistani statements with what one can track as easily as with help of social media in terms of reports from Pakistani citizens, what have they observed, what have they heard, the two stories are not fitting. During his press conference, quite famous press conference, which was widely accepted in the West as bare money, this is a matter of fact, nothing else happened in this war and nothing else matters. Pakistani Air Vice Marshal was explaining how they were tracking ever more Indian aircraft approaching the border and they knew in advance what are the Indians going to do and they have scrambled their fighters on time and then shot down who knows how many. The number is increasing by the month, which is passing ever since, Indian aircraft. So, okay, fine. Then I sat down with several aides and we went through the reporting in the social media of Pakistan, in Urdu foremost, which is something apparently nobody did, at least not in the West. And so it turns out the Indian airstrike came in, hit selected targets in Pakistan, and there was no response from Pakistan. It's as simple as that. There was no reaction for at least 15 minutes. No reports about aircraft engines, somebody hearing aircraft engines or scrambling jets from air bases. Nothing for 15 minutes. The only report was about the launch of 2 or 3 surface-to-air missiles from Nur Khan Air Base. That was the sole reaction. So whatever happened afterwards happened something like 1 hour later, after the Indian airstrike on terrorist camps inside Pakistan. But during this strike, Indian aircraft have, and not only aircraft, army was involved as well by the means of the UAVs. They have completed their mission and returned safely. Nothing happened to a single Indian. There was absolutely no damage. And on the contrary, conclusion is very simple, or actually on hand. The Pakistanis were taken by surprise, but completely. So, alone this press conference by this Pakistani Air Vice Marshal is making absolutely no sense, because it is not fitting with what can be made out on basis of reports in the social media. And I'm not talking about 1 or 2 reports in the social media. There are dozens and dozens. And one says 15 minutes later, after the Indian airstrikes were completed and Indian aircraft were probably back on their bases already, there is then report, engines, jets are starting taking off from this airbase, taking off from another airbase, more SAMs are fired, then movement of low-flying aircraft over this area, over another area, and so on. So obviously the Pakistanis were late with reacting. They were taken by surprise. Then it took them time to comprehend what has happened to them, to make a decision how are they going to react, and then they moved to react. But the strikes themselves, Indian retaliatory strikes on terrorist targets, they were completed absolutely without any kind of major problems. That is the point. And this is something we have addressed with particular care in the book published in January. It's going to become available in India now in early March. 88 Hours War. So I don't know how much you want me to continue in this regard, but that is one of the points from this book, that Pakistan is boasting with something that simply didn't happen the way it is explaining, which arguably is in best traditions of what is Pakistan explaining, or the way Pakistan is treating true, so to say, already for decades.
Tom, we have time for one more question. And because the time is running out, I can see the ticker in front of me. The question that I wish to ask you is that when did the downing of Rafales become such a big deal? I mean, even Donald Trump started off with 5 and then 7, then 9. Apparently now 11 are down, and by the time his turn is over, I think the entire Indian Air Force will have been grounded. But what I wanted to ask you was that, did disinformation and misinformation play a very major part during Operation Sindur?
In order to explain this, I have to explain this from the Pakistani point of view. They have nothing to show. They have nothing to show. What can they show? Except we have shot down 4, 5, 6, 7, 11, 3 dots, and then 11 Rafales or whatever in India. And even if, let's say, they have shot down 110 Indian aircraft, the point is they have lost a war. So what they have won is one air battle, theoretically, if they have won. But they have lost a war. That is the point. They have lost a war. And battle is just a part of a war, not an entire war. So they have focused their whole attention on this winning battle, whether they have actually won it or not. And all that matters to them, and all that matters to their supporters, is this one battle, which actually wasn't even one battle, but 3 or 4. But it's a different story. Anyway, the point is this. India is trying to explain, we are trying to strike terror targets. Nobody listens to that, at least not outside of India, sadly, or at least it was largely ignored. Therefore, Pakistan was free, or left free, to explain, oh, we have won the war through winning one battle. Nobody cared about these jihadists in Pakistan being the same that were actually plotting already the World Trade Center attacks on 9/11. The same people, the same ideas, the same backgrounds, the same trainers and so on and so on. This is sadly something where India is not that well connected like Pakistan is in the West. Unfortunately. I hope that in the future you are going to find a way to avoid such situations, because you have won a war, but you didn't win the public narrative, so to say.
Thank you very much for your time, Tom, and it was wonderful speaking to you. Ladies and gentlemen, a huge round of applause for Tom Cooper. Wonderfully explained. Thank you very much.